All right, welcome back to another episode of Potential Mayhem with Aaron. Playoffs are starting to heat up. The drama already in full effect. We got series swinging in unexpected directions, teams on the verge of closing things out, and a few squads fighting just to stay alive. We'll break down what's happening with Cleveland and Toronto, Spurs taking control, Lakers looking to finish Houston, and OKC already sending Phoenix home. Plus, we'll touch on the NFL draft, some notable selections that have people talking, and a few other headlines making waves around the sports world. So lock in. It's Potential Mayhem with Aaron. Let's get into the latest playoff update. All teams that I thought would want to be on the same page with me and the Cleveland Cavaliers, they spent the weekend looking to prove they don't mind the criticism. Either that or they're telling LeBron they have a need for his services next year. Because what transpired in Toronto this past weekend was unfortunately predictable. After watching the way the Cavs allowed Toronto back in it late in Game 2, I found myself lying to myself when looking at my predictions, knowing damn well Toronto would test the Cavs and go for the dub, which they did successfully by a large margin. But there was no way Cleveland would allow them to even the series, right? Absolutely wrong. And in such fashion that the chatter is already sparking up again. Spider and his playoff struggles, the Harden narrative regarding the playoffs. This all while Toronto bigs are putting in work against the Cavs, who, in my opinion, would have the better selection if we're comparing the two clubs. But the drop-off has been glaring. Mobley went from 17 and 25 to 15 and 8. And I haven't really been able to break those games down to see what adjustments Toronto has made, but I know that they got a double-double out of Murray, Boyles, and RJ Barrett looks like a true blue in his playoff debut. The series heads back to Cleveland for a pivotal Game 5. We'll see what happens with when these two meet again. I imagine the Cavs prefer this doesn't go 7, so I expect they handle business and then close it out in 6. Then begin to prepare for what appears to be Orlando again. All right, a big performance from the biggest in the game helped propel the Spurs to a 3-1 lead. This all came after the Blazers jumped out to an early lead with contributions from Avia, Holiday, and Grant. They got rolling in the first half and were looking like they could run away with Game 4 and tie the series again. But then the second half began and the Spurs started closing in. Both Wemby and Fox provided 27 and 28, respectively, with a solid 16 from Castle. So just as we figured, Spurs opted to take control of the series and not take any chances. Wemby mentioned in his post-game interview that he was not pleased with how the concussion protocol was handled by those outside of the Spurs organization, which raises questions regarding what happened. I'm sure in the next coming weeks we'll probably hear more about that and how that actually went down. But as for right now, he did praise the Spurs medical staff for the way that they handled it. Spurs headed home with the opportunity to close out and advance to the semis for the first time as a unit. Despite almost giving up a lead late, San Antonio was able to wrap the series in a gentleman's sweep at home. Spurs jumped out to an early lead that just ballooned. They seemed to take their foot off the gas late in the fourth before regaining control and sending Portland home. San Antonio will now be awaiting the conclusion of the Minnesota-Denver series, which is currently 3-2 heading back to Minnesota. Obviously, they are without Ant-Man and DiVincenzo. Wemby has claimed the league's first unanimous Defensive Player of the Year honors. Keldon Johnson has won the six-man honors. Semifinal rounds are rapidly approaching, and it's guaranteed we'll see more entertaining matchups coming up. Now, back out in Boston, despite a slow start by Boston's elite, the Siege jumped out to a large early lead despite the return of Embiid. And I thought inserting Embiid at this point could disrupt the Sixers' cohesion, and that seemed to be exactly what caused the disruption. Despite the slow start, the Siege led the majority of the game comfortably and got contributions from Pritchard, Tatum, and Brown, all scoring 32, 30, and 20. Philly will need Edgecombe to tap back into that Game 2 energy somehow again for a shot for Philly to get back in this series. Playoff P, he'll need to help lead the charge once they land in Boston again. A lot of the talent on the Sixers, I expect them to put up a fight on the road in an attempt to extend their series and avoid going home. Celtics won by 22 to take the lead 3-1 in their series, looking to close out when the series returns to Boston for Game 5. After Boston jumped out to a 3-1 lead, Philly was able to find some cohesion after reinserting Joel Embiid to the lineup. Edgecombe found success again in Game 5 to follow up his Game 2 emergence. The playoff P has been solid in his role defending and being the third option. Philly fought back to even the series and pushed a Game 7 in Boston. After Tatum's late exit in Game 6 due to leg soreness, he was ruled out for Game 7. And despite Tatum's absence, the Celtics had late opportunities. But the combination of Embiid and Maxey were just too much. Boston, who trailed early and throughout majority of the game, made it within one, but fell short, much of their own demise. They put up threes and shied away from attempting to put pressure on the interior. JB attempted a couple of times, but looked a bit fatigued on those attempts. Most noticeably was the lack of assistance from Pritchard, Shireman, or Hauser with the series on the line. Instead, Maxey closed things out late and get into the cup. 109-100 victory that sealed the series for Philly. Philly advanced to play the Knicks in the semi. In more predictable news, Houston came out in desperation to extend their series after the dramatic Game 3 finish where the Lakers salvaged the lead late to secure a 3-0 lead. Rockets starting five all provided more than 15 points each without anybody from the bench scoring in double digits. The luxuries of playing at home up against it. Series swings back to LA with the Lakers looking to close in 5 like a gentleman on some YG type vibe. All things considered, we anticipate OKC closing out their series in 4 in Phoenix. Lakers held AR out in anticipation we will close out with another game. He gets the rest before facing who we believe will be OKC. Game 5 will tip off Wednesday at Crypto, and the Lakers will be expected to creatively put an end to this Rockets 25 campaign. So the Lakers head back to Houston with another chance to close out in 6. Looking to go ahead and get this series over with, not wanting to extend the series and head back to LA, which I think is a good idea for all of the right reasons. You look at the fact that KD was ruled out before the game, so you avoid the potential of him possibly returning and playing in a pivotal deciding Game 7. LeBron had been looking a bit fatigued heading into the last 2 games. This game he seemed to be a little bit more poised, looked like he was back locked in and he had that energy as he was able to lead his guys to a victory 98-78. He was 28 points, 37 minutes, 7 rebounds, 8 assists. Limited those turnovers to 3, which had been something that was a topic of discussion for the prior 2 games. And he also got some help from Roy Hachimura, who scored 21, which was followed up by Reeves, scoring 15. This one, they got some contributions from, a little bit of contribution from everybody. They got out to a nice sized lead there in about the second quarter, never looked back. And that had been something that we hadn't seen a whole lot of in previous games, where they may jump out to a big lead early, but then kind of get into a bit of an offensive rut. They kind of stall out and allow the Rockets to get back in the game, and it starts to become a little bit more of a challenge. This game, they seemed to not really care that they were on the road. Everybody seemed to be locked in, one poise, one focus. They were able to limit Jabari Smith to 9 points in 42 minutes, 3 of 11 shooting. Even though Torrey Eason, he got 14, which was an improvement for him by his standards, especially in this series. But limiting Sengun to 17 on 5 of 12. DeAndre Ayton played amazing. Amin Thompson, I think he had been averaging around 18, and that's what he finished with. And then holding Reed Shepard to 10. So that was pretty much the story of the game. Their bench basically gave them, I think, right there, like 10 points altogether. So very strong, solid performance. They do get the prize of OKC in the next round, but we didn't want to see the Lakers lose a 3-0 lead and have that stain on their jacket, or a 3-1 lead. Actually, I think they went up 3-0, so it would have been a 3-0 loss if they had lost in 7. But nonetheless, we don't have to worry about that. Head to OKC. Game 1 begins Tuesday. And
You're just looking for a great effort from the Lakers coming out against the defending champions and possibly the two-time MVP in SGA. So we'll see what they got for us.
All right, moving on to Atlanta and New York. After tying the series at 2 apiece in Atlanta, New York returned home for Game 5. And the momentum New York found in Game 4 seemed to travel back home for the Knicks. Hawks struggled again to find consistency on offense. The Knicks won by 29 to retake control of the series and the ability to close out in 6 when they returned to Atlanta. For the first time in the series, CJ couldn't find his rhythm offensively, shooting 3 for 10 and ending with 6 points. On a night where Brunson put up 39, Atlanta needed somebody to match his energy. Atlanta's 4 other starters finished with double digits, which indicates what the Knicks' defensive strategy was. Focus on CJ, let everybody else kind of do their thing. Atlanta will need to find some answers in hopes of extending this series to a Game 7 when they meet on Thursday at Phillips Arena.
All right, so the Knicks went ahead and wrapped up the Hawks in 6, despite us thinking that this could possibly go 7. Knicks had other intentions. They came into Atlanta and just decided, hey, look, we'll go ahead and wrap this series up right now and prepare for the semifinal round. That opponent hadn't been determined at this point. The Knicks said, you know what, doesn't matter. We'll go ahead and get us a couple of extra days rest. They came out and played like they were looking to close out in a closeout game. Atlanta didn't stand a chance. They figured out a couple of things, I think, in games 5, possibly 4. They were able to continue to stifle CJ offensively. He couldn't really get it going. Jalen Johnson struggled all series. This was his first playoff experience. Even though he finished with 21 in Game 4, a lot of those points came after New York had grown their lead to something that was just insurmountable. You had a little dust up between Dyson Daniels and Mitch Robinson. Both of them got ejected. They got to go ahead and beat the traffic. So Mikal Bridges, he had a little bit of a coming out party. It seemed like he kind of found his stroke, got his offensive rhythm. OG Anunoby, they both just looked like they were ready to kind of get this thing over with. I don't know if it was the lemon pepper wings from Magic City or they just, enjoyed their experience, their ATL experience. But either way it goes, they'll be heading back to New York and looking to face Philly. Not really too much to talk about, as you can see in these highlights. It was a lot of New York Knicks dominating, not much from the Hawks. Nothing against the Hawks. Got plenty of love for those guys. Would love to see them come back next year, with this experience and have a little bit of a deeper run and put up a little bit more of a fight. But as for this game, you got OG finished with 29. That was followed by Mikal Bridges, 24. They were the leading scorers for the Knicks. This one, Brunson finished with 17, I think, after he had 39 the game before. For the Hawks, you had Jalen Johnson, who led all scorers with 21. But again, they lost 140 to 89 in a contest that wasn't even close. So we'll get New York facing the 76ers after their Game 7 stunner. We'll see how that seems to shape out.
All right, down in the desert, the Thunder lost a key member before they made it out to Phoenix, but they didn't lose a step in the competition. 41 from SGA in Game 3, expected. 31 from SGA in Game 4, no surprise. Yes, the Thunder can survive in times like these. Phoenix came out taking an early lead in Game 4, but in OKC fashion, it was short-lived. And before Phoenix could blink, the Thunder walked them down, sent Phoenix on vacay. Phoenix battled to get into the playoffs with their new look, playing 2 play-in games after getting stunned by Portland in the first one at home, and then beating the Golden State Warriors to get that last seed. But Booker didn't look like himself throughout the playoffs, play-in included. And I'm not sure many expected a different outcome. OKC will now wait for the Lakers-Rockets series to conclude to figure out who they'll be playing next in the semifinal round. Lakers now have more reason to get back on track when they return on Wednesday against Houston. All right, and so in more unexpected news, Detroit has been on alert since their Game 1 loss to Orlando. Their playoff run has started with some familiar vibes seeming to extend from last season. Actually, I think their losing streak goes back like 18 seasons. Trouble with winning home games in the playoffs. They finally snapped it in game 2. Turns out they're struggling to win playoff games, period. Cade put up some big numbers in game 1, putting up a fight in a losing effort. But what have we learned? Detroit needs another scorer. Cade can't be tasked with literally carrying the entire offensive load and they expect to win. Tobias gave him 20 to add to Cade's 25, but that was on 7 of 23 shooting. Detroit has fought to give themselves a chance late, but has been unsuccessful in holding the Magic off. Turnovers have played a contributing factor. Magic seem to be the more physical team and are making life hell for Detroit's offense. The key to Orlando's success seems to be Desmond Bane playing well offensively. When Bane has scored more than 15 in their wins, Bane scored 17, 25, and 22. Game 4 score indicates how the game was played, which was not pretty. Orlando travels back to Detroit looking to close out the series.
All of the drama has been existing in this series between the top-seeded Pistons and last-seed Magic. After Orlando surrendered a 22-point lead in Game 6 that would have ended the series, Orlando was now facing their own elimination in a must-win scenario. Despite Detroit's struggles winning home playoff games, Orlando had to learn from their prior matchups and fight off the psychological effects of giving up a large lead. McCarroll led all scorers with 38, but that was really an unassisted performance because none of his teammates scored more than 16. Whereas Cunningham and Harris both scored over 30 each. Denise Jenkins gave a solid 16 on 5 for 8, which included 4 from 5 from the three-point line. And Jalen Duren showed up, gave us another solid performance, added 15 points on 5 and 9 shooting with 15 boards. Detroit advances with a 116-94 victory over Orlando that resulted in the firing of Jamal Mosley and an extension for Bickerstaff. This marks the 3rd consecutive first-round exit for the Magic. Orlando dealt with injuries all season, but it's been rumored that McCarroll and Mosley were not always on the same page. We'll return later with more analysis of this Pistons-Cavs matchup further down the series.
Then we're heading back to Minnesota for pivotal Game 5. This rivalry has been everything we expected just 3 games in. We've already got sound clips from McDaniels calling out Denver's less than glamorous defense, which was followed by a dust-up at the end of Game 3 after a late basket by Jaden to cap off a blowout. This was after the Wolves saw both DiVincenzo and Edwards exiting early with injuries, where Edwards should return. Granted, the Wolves can continue their dominance as they lead 3-1, or actually has been extended to 3-2 now. DiVincenzo, unfortunately, had surgery to repair a torn Achilles, so his season is over. Anthony Edwards avoided ligament damage after hyperextending his left knee on a shot contest. Despite the unfortunate news, Minnesota got a historic performance from an unlikely suspect in Ayo Dosunmu, who put up 43 off the bench. That performance helped the Wolves go up 3-1, looking to close out in 5. Everybody's been waiting for Joker to show up with one of his performances, but Gobert has seemed to hold his own throughout this series.
All right, so after a pretty convincing fight back by Denver Nuggets in Game 5, headed back to Denver for Game 6, where many people, including myself, were expecting Denver to really show up and try to push for a 7th game, but Minnesota came out with a different energy, had different plans despite missing Edwards and DiVincenzo. As you can see, Jokic came out early, looked like he was ready to kind of set the tone a little bit, which is what I expected. I was looking for Jokic to have a big offensive game, but unexpectedly you got some more sparks coming off the bench for Minnesota. You got Shannon, and then you also had pretty much helpful in different aspects respectively. Shannon was more of an offensive assistant, and then Clark came in and was more of a defensive specialist. You also had a big game by Jaden McDaniels, who led all scorers with 32, as well as Julius Randle, who followed up with 18. Gobert played another solid defensive game against Jokic, and that's despite both Jokic having 28 and Cameron Johnson having 27. But in the end, the Wolves, they came out victorious, closing out the series with a Game 6 win, 110-98. which essentially set them on the path to meet the Spurs, who've been waiting for the semifinal round. I think a lot of people were expecting to see Denver and San Antonio match up, which they had given us somewhat of a preview heading into the playoffs, with San Antonio kind of seeming to not really want to play at full strength against Denver late in the series. Some people believe it was to kind of set a specific path in the playoffs, whereas Denver didn't really put up much resistance either. So I don't know if it was they both were looking to face off against each other. That was the expectation, but pretty much a banged up Denver team going into the playoffs. They really just looked depleted, and Jamal Murray and Jokic didn't seem to really have that magic touch that they've shown in the past to be able to withstand Minnesota's energy and some of these young guys that they have that we weren't really expecting to show up at this point in the postseason. But here we go. So they'll get ready to face each other in the second round of the semis.
All right, the NFL draft has officially wrapped, and we'll be taking a look at who improved and what it all will look like. As expected, Mendoza went number 1 overall to Vegas. But probably the biggest shocker was my Rams taking Ty Simpson at number 13 overall. As of late, Simpson had been getting glowing praise from analysts, and there were debates surrounding when he would get picked. Now, we're talking about the QB we saw on the run against Florida State. Also got smoked in the playoffs by Indiana. I was shocked initially hearing the pick, not because I felt Simpson would create a competition with Stafford, but because I felt they could have gotten him in the later round. Seems like there was belief he, in fact, would not be there when LA was set to pick again. Looking at the following picks shown on the screen, I get reminded that you have to trust the Rams have the team's best interest at the forefront. Stafford gave us a sigh of relief with his announcement that he'll be returning next year, but we know the clock is ticking. It's year to year at this stage in his career. All right, so Cooper Flagg has been named Rookie of the Year officially. Flagg received 56 first place votes, with Knipple finishing second. Edgecombe received over 90 third place votes. I think that was pretty much predictable, even though Knipple did give a nice little push there at the end. And that's where things stand right now. Across the playoffs and around the sports world, several teams are one win away from moving on. Others are fighting to keep their seasons alive. And if these first few games are any indication, the next round should be even better. We'll keep an eye on how these series wrap up, how the draft picks begin shaping their team's futures, and what other storylines continue to develop. Till next time, thanks for tuning in. I'm Aaron. This has been Potential Mayhem with Aaron.